Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome everybody to our webinar about the blueprint to responsibly sourcing animal protein ingredients for the pet industry. I am so happy to be your host today for our webinar. We're going to get right into it because we have an hour to spend together and we have a fun agenda. I will run us through some things about PSC and some announcements that we have. We're going to spend a good chunk of time introducing this new tool that we have. We call it the blueprint. We have some actions that you all will be able to take following the discussion about the blueprint, and finally, plenty of time for Q&A. But I'm excited to see everyone rolling in, and I'm excited to get into it. But first, it's possible that some of you joining are new to PSC. We are the Pet Sustainability Coalition, and we are a nonprofit with a mission to help the pet industry have a collaborative and positive impact on the communities and environments where we work. We do that in a couple of different ways. We have a membership model, so companies in the pet industry can join us and get support on their individual company sustainability journey. And we also, as a coalition, tackle those issues that are maybe too big for just one company to solve. So we're trying to move together as a pet industry towards some positive impact. This industry transformation comes in three main pillars. We do a lot of work with ingredients, which we will be talking a lot more about today. We do really great packaging work as well as social responsibility. A little bit more about our member companies and where we work. We're in 17 different countries and in almost all of the 50 US states. And here are some of the wonderful companies that are PSC members. You can see that we have representation across the whole supply chain in the pet industry, from brands to retailers, manufacturers, distributors. Anyone along the supply chain has a role to play in sustainability, and we welcome you as members. This is part of our webinar series. I'm excited to see you all here today, and maybe some of you have been to our previous webinars. Of course, today we're going to be talking about the blueprint for sustainable protein sourcing. Our next webinar is actually just next week. Our executive director, Jim, will be hosting it with a variety of different retailers, and it'll be a buyer insights panel. So that's August 1st. We also have some really exciting topics on deck. Later in August, we'll be doing materiality assessments, and then some other exciting topics that you can see here. Another quick announcement is that the Pet Sustainability Coalition will be at Super Zoo this year. That's coming up mid-August in Las Vegas. So if you are also attending this trade show, please come to our coffee hour and our networking event that you can see here. And if you have any questions about any of this, feel free to contact us afterwards. All right, so that is our welcome and agenda. So I'm excited to introduce who you're going to hear from today. You've already heard from me a little bit. I'm Allison Reeser. I'm the Director of Sustainability and Innovation here at the Pet Sustainability Coalition. We're also going to hear from Steffi Volo, who is the Chief Impact Officer at Earth Animal. Steffi is also on PSC's Board of Directors and is just such a champion of the work that we're doing together. We're also going to hear from Darren Vanstone, who is the Managing Director at Okatra. Darren brings expertise in responsible sourcing, animal welfare, sustainable food systems, a lot of different topics that our blueprint touches on. And Darren was instrumental in helping us create the blueprint. So I'm excited to have a conversation with him today. All right, so here it is. Here's our blueprint for responsibly sourcing animal protein ingredients for the pet industry, also known as the blueprint. So Steffi, if you want to come on camera, I would love to hear a little bit more from you. So of course we see the Earth Animal sponsor logo down there. So you are also instrumental in helping us create this. Before, I know the audience doesn't quite know what it is yet, but to kick us off, could you just explain what is your hope for the blueprint?
Sure. First of all, can you hear me okay, Allison?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me be a part of this really, really important webinar. And as Allison said, a really important issue, I think, that we are all looking for solutions for in the pet industry to make as much positive impact as we possibly can. So in order for me to answer that question, I have to take a little step back into Earth Animals' sustainability journey. So I think many of you know that our mission is to enhance and preserve quality of life for animals, people, and the earth. And Dr. Bob and Susan Goldstein, our co-founders, certainly knew what they were doing when they named our company Earth Animal. Sustainability has been a part of our DNA, and also as a consumer products company, we have an obligation to use the Earth's resources responsibly. And, back in 2015 and 2016, we weren't really sure what that meant. We also know we have a fundamental responsibility for the welfare of both the animals that we use for our pet foods or other products and those that we keep as companions at all stages of their lives. So this is really difficult, right? In full transparency, what we all do is really difficult. We love nurturing and nourishing the animals in our lives with great food and treats, but we also know it takes a great toll on the lives of animals, people, and the earth in general to produce it. So, like I said, back in 2015 and 16, we just didn't really understand what sustainable or responsible sourcing meant. We have all these ambitions at Earth Animal, and we knew we needed to learn about it, but didn't know how to get started. And my hope for the blueprint is so that people that are in similar, or companies, excuse me, that are in similar situations to us have a guide, don't have to really take the time to reinvent the wheel or to expend resources to understand how to get started. That this blueprint is a place for them to go to and understand and provide a guide, a framework for them to get started on their, sort of responsible and sustainable sourcing journey. So again, that we can move the industry forward with positive impact. So that's my
Right.
hope. Yeah,
I think that will resonate with a lot of companies, that sense of like, where do we start? We know this is important, but what do we do?
exactly.
I wanted to also ask, this is going to be a free tool available online. Why did Earth Animal decide to support the creation of it specifically being a free tool?
For that reason, I mean, I think those of you who know me know that I believe wholeheartedly in collaboration. And again, it's so complex, this system. What we do is really difficult. And I think it's important for everybody to have the tools and resources they need in order to be as positively impactful as possible.
Absolutely. Plus one to that. I wanted to also talk to you, Steffi, about the four-factor framework. So this was a tool that PSE published in 2021, and really this established a common starting point for companies to think about their impact as far as environmental, social, nutrition, and animal welfare. And so the blueprint is really a follow-through to the commitment that came out of the four-factor framework to provide further guidance and specific instructions. So could you just walk us through how you've used both the four-factor framework and the blueprint? Any specific examples you want to share?
Well, both absolutely brought us to our partner supply code of conduct. And again, we both tools are I guess open source or free to use, and both of them were so important to Earth Animal and our journey that we felt like others in our industry needed to use them. And it's incredible to think about, because I think when people think about their journeys, it's so easy to think about, well, animal welfare is the most important thing to us, and that's what we need to focus on. And that's great, right? Because when you're looking at this four-factor framework, you do have to prioritize But this allows you to be holistic in your responsible sourcing and think about all aspects of sustainability. And it was critical in how we created our framework, our sustainable framework, and our partner code of conduct, so that when we started to go out and look for like-minded or any new partner of ours, that partner code of conduct is such a critical tool so that we are both aligned. And if they are not there yet, we can create a roadmap for them to help them get to where we would like them to be, or help them achieve the targets that we set forth for them. So they were both critical in creating our sustainability strategy around our all of our sourcing, actually, but primarily our animal protein sourcing.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing. All right, I am curious to hear from the rest of you joining. So we're going to launch a little Zoom poll. We heard sort of where Steffi is on her sustainability journey at Earth Animal, but I'm curious to hear where everyone else is at. So we've just launched a poll. Where are you in your sustainability work? And for people who maybe are not in the sustainability industry or working for a company where that's relevant, let us know, what do you think is the most challenging part of this work? While everyone is submitting their answers, I wanted to just let you know that we will keep our eye on the chat and the Q&A. We will bring up the Q&A towards the end, but feel free to submit those questions at any time. All right, everyone can take a few more seconds before we reveal the results. And I'm seeing some questions come in, which is great. Excited to get to those later. Okay, let's go ahead and close the poll. All right, so the results show most people are saying that they're in the planning and implementing phase of sustainability. So in second place was in the process of identifying and prioritizing our most important issues. And of course, some people in all the other buckets. So absolutely, we have people along the whole process. And the great news is that Darren, who I'm going to invite on next, will walk us through how the blueprint can help you with any phase of the journey. So Darren, over to you.
Thanks so much, Allison. Appreciate that. Thank you, Steffi. Yeah, I also just want to give a shout out to Steffi and Earth Animal. The work they've done has been really, really essential to sort of bringing this together. So as Stephanie mentioned, in 2021, the PSC released the four-factor framework, and that really focused on sustainable products. So the four-factor framework defined a sustainable product as one that is economically viable and has positive environmental, social, nutritional, and animal welfare impacts, right? I think what's really interesting, and what I've learned from the PSC folks, is it was this transition to really recognizing the role and the value that the pet food industry and the pet industry, the larger pet industry, actually has in influencing not only their supply chain, but sort of the food industry globally. And I think that was really helpful, provided a great starting point. As Allison mentioned, there was a commitment in there to ensure that we were going to continue to do something with it. And I think this is, of course, the next step. So if the first part was about products, this is about ingredients, right? So how do you ensure that you're sourcing products that will allow you to deliver a sustainable, sorry, how do you source ingredients that you can deliver a sustainable product? So it's really about everything that happens outside of your own four walls, right? So whereas products internal, this is external. And actually what makes this thing a little bit complicated for all of us, because the most significant environmental and all of the animal welfare impacts actually will happen at a farm level. And those are the levels that we have sort of the least understanding of, the least oversight of, and the least control of. And so the objective of the blueprint then is to help us sort of do this together in a collaborative way, so that we can actually have impact, right? ultimately, these are the objectives going in. The first one is really about building the competency of the PSC members. And again, this is available to anyone, including consultants, as it was asked. So you can just be able to download it off the PSC website. So help companies start where they are and try to move forward. Secondly, accelerate members' own work by sort of meeting them where they are, help supporting that, and then also ensuring that we're providing them some tools to be able to engage their supply chain and their broader stakeholders. And of course, the third part is to ensure that what we're doing is aligned with the work of other industries, global frameworks, reporting frameworks, and authoritative statements to ensure that what we're doing aligns with those of the others, right? And I think it's already sort of been mentioned that that sort of addresses the two issues. The first issue being the resources to do this. These are very, very, very large issues and they can be complex. So by aligning with the other industries, the food industry, the apparel industry, by making sure that we're looking at the same things, we can actually use some of the resources that are available from those other industries. And it also really provides an opportunity to influence your own supply chain. And while you may not be able to do that on your own because it's a big supply chain and you will be buying a certain portion of that, that portion is actually really valuable to the economic viability of the global food industry. And therefore, by working with, by aligning your work with the human food industry, and I think Steffi might have some examples of this later that she might want to share, we can actually have impact. We can make sure that producers are actually getting paid for making improvements, and we can make sure that we're dealing with the entire carcass of the animal. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we've really given you it's a big, right? It's really big. It's 70 pages, which academics, it's like an afternoon, it's like quick for them. But for the rest of us in the rest of the world, this is a really big document, 70 pages. We don't really expect you to read the whole thing. You don't need to. And as we go through the parts, I think I'd be happy to sort of help you think how you would use each part. I think reminder that this is really just a process of continuous improvement and prioritization. We want you to start where you are and use the resources that are available to you. Built into all of this is the assumption that you're going to build yourself a network that will include your peer companies, your PSC member advisory team, relevant NGOs, and a lot of them were kind enough to participate in this process, and they're listed in the glossary, sorry, in the appendices. So building yourself as a network, working with your suppliers to make sure that you have this broad understanding. Don't do it. You don't have to do it on your own, right? We want to share resources with people who are doing it and with those who are sort of invested in making it easier for you. So the first thing we do is a materiality assessment. We've used the Global Reporting Initiative structure just because it's credible, and it also provides a ton of resources. So we'll talk through the different standards and the topics, but ultimately most of those are available. There are reports that are freely available from the GRI website, the Global Reporting Initiative. Again, you can find all that information inside the document. So you'll actually just be able to do the work on your own. So you don't have to go out and recreate. A lot of questions can be answered through that. So we're following their materiality assessment. And that's really what the first part of this, of the document is. So parts 1 to 4 are a materiality assessment that follows this process. Part 5 is really the process that Steffi had mentioned before, right? So we have all these things in our heads that we need to do. We need some organization. How do we move forward? And so that's going to help it. Part 3 is just there's glossaries and appendices, so information you may need. So it's available. Next, please. All right. So following the GRI materiality assessment process, part 1 actually starts by describing the pet foods role. The pet industry's role in the broader food system, right? I think, as I mentioned before, seem to be transitioning from this understanding that the pet food industry takes products that would be potentially waste and turns them into value. I think when we actually think about it from a broader sense, what we recognize is that the global food system relies on industries like the pet industry and the apparel industry and pharmaceuticals and all those other industries. Um, and that contributes to the economic viability. So if pet food wasn't there, the industry would collapse, right? And I think because of that, we haven't really seen our opportunities to actually have broader influence. So there's a bit about that, talking about business relationships, defining stakeholders, all that sort of work. Secondly, includes the working definitions and concepts, including this idea of responsible sourcing, which is a due diligence process for member companies to do two things. So, right, reduce negative, but also promote positive impacts. We don't want to just not do harm. I think there's a recognition within the PSC. There's real value to causing good things to happen. I think people are really motivated by that. I think the sort of little tagline that we've added on is just recognizing that in doing so, we want to ensure that we're being really cognizant that our work doesn't have unintended consequences. And I think that's kind of a big thing for all of us. We don't want to focus on a single area and find out that we've caused problems elsewhere. And there's some guidance in there on that as well. Secondly, material impacts, which is what we're all mostly interested in, are those that are have significant impacts of the business on something else. So next, please. So the point of the materiality assessment is to take this universe of potential impacts and to break them down to those things that are most relevant to your supply chain for this work, right? So we start with the 4-factor frameworks. We recognize that nutrition is more of a product level than at an ingredient level. Apologies to Tina Owens and all the Regen Ag folks. That stuff will probably change, but right now we just excluded it. And then, so we focused on the three. So the social impact, the impact on the environment, and the impact on the welfare of animals. So which are 3 of the 4 factors. We've followed this through using the GRI process where we identified the most potential impacts based on PSC member interviews, interviews with the working group, and just broad understanding and desk research. Once we got those material impacts together, we had this potential set. We took them to external stakeholders, including NGOs, experts, and a bunch of other people, investor groups, and we compared them against. We have chosen to use GRI for the reasons I mentioned, but we also sort of compared them to ensure that they worked within SASB, that they aligned with the targets of the SBTIs, the Science-Based Target Initiatives, and also sort of accounted for the same impacts that were part of the new European Social Sustainability Reporting Standards that came out this year in 2023, sorry, and the EU deforestation regulations. So everything that's on these lists are actually going to be on those lists as well. So we came up with these 3. So a couple quick things on this. Ultimately, the impact on people and communities is really based on this understanding, based on the work of the United Nations. So it's a bit different than other ones in that because it is generated out of the UN declarations, there's the potential that any sort of the social impacts could be impacts on human rights, and therefore we're recommending that that is included as part of your supplier code of conduct, and that you do that. So as a minimum, and then secondly, there's lots of suggestions about social impacts. Companies, SEDEX, AIM Progress, which is a great NGO that brings together it's an industry collaboration to look at the impact of business on the lives and quality of life and economic well-being for communities and for people. Impact on the environment, we've come down to these 4. These are sort of key indicators and the ones that are sort of most impactful. And then also the impact on animal on the welfare of farm animals. So this is included in the GRI documents, but not in the sort of detail that it would matter to you. So we have looked to the Global Coalition for Animal Welfare, which is an organization, an industry collaboration of 14 companies, global companies that across the supply chain that have got together and identified the care practices that deliver good welfare and to understand that. So everything we're giving you here has been vetted through that engagement process and is just a general, it is globally recognized as sort of where we want to be. Next, please. All right, so part 3 and 4. So part 2, we came down to the potential impacts from animal agriculture. Part 3 and 4 is really where companies are going to take this and help make it meaningful to them, right? So the potential impacts are for the industry in general, but you will have specifics, right? So you will have things that are more important to you. Some of you will be sourcing from places where some of those impacts are not relevant. We know that the impacts where you source is really going to, and those impacts, the way that they become material to you is the species. So the species itself will have, for example, a beef cattle will provide, sorry, will have higher emissions per unit of protein than, for example, a salmon per unit of protein, right? So there are things about the individual animals, biological realities about them that affect the impacts that they will have. Second thing is production systems. So we've sort of simplified it into intensive systems, which are characterized by high stocking densities. These are sort of your commodity production systems and the ones that are most common. And they will have certain impacts on animal welfare and environment that will be different from the other ones. And then finally, the production region. So there will be regulations, legislations, and the impacts of climate in each of those that change the way that they raise animals and the impacts on the environment and on animal welfare. So that's what part 3 will do. So I'll help you take a look at those. It'll give you a way to think about it and prioritize it. Part 4 will then actually by species, and we've chosen 8 species. That I'm going to try it. So beef cattle, deer, which is venison, sheep and lamb, poultry, so broiler chickens, egg-laying hens, turkeys, pigs, and then farm salmon. There is scope to include other things. So we recognize that this is limited to farmed animals, so it doesn't include wild-caught species, just because that's a complexity that we didn't think we could handle. And it's a different impacts. There's also things like insects that would be really helpful, and I think the PSEA actually has a great network for industry, for the insect protein industry that are looking to develop some standards. So I think that's really helpful. And then also cell ag and plant-based. I think there's an opportunity to do that, and would just put that out there for anybody that's really interested. Next, please. Okay, so, and this is just the final part. Part 5 is just this, what Stephanie had mentioned. There is a process, right? Obviously, none of you are going to go left to right. That's just not going to happen. So again, just use it where you are, and use what's valuable to you. So one of the first things that we would recommend is just to think about what your goals or ambitions are long term, right? I think ultimately there's value to having the sort of North Star. There's value to engaging your teams around your company values and your objectives. You really want to be thinking about where do you want to be in 10 to 15 years? What do you want to be able to say about the lives of the animals, the environmental impact, the impact on people and communities that your company has through its sourcing. And also sort of provide some focus and direction when you forget what you were supposed to be doing. What we find is companies that do this really can, it allows them to be a little bit more proactive and a lot less reactive to things as they come up. Secondly, we would recommend a supplier code of conduct. I've spoken a little bit about this before. PSC has one template available, and I think that they'll be looking to update that soon. So that would be sort of a baseline expectation to make sure that includes compliance with local regulations, legislation, and the social impacts we spoke about before. Traceability is really complex. So this all industries that source from animal agriculture have a traceability issue. There's an added complexity for those companies in the pet food industry that source from renderers. But ultimately, it's just something we need to be able to figure out, right? I think though there's going to be some ongoing pressure from the new European directives to actually be able to map that supply chain. But to Steffi's point and Allison's point, this is really something you're not going to be able to do by yourself. There's really value to it, but it will require sort of the concerted effort of a broad collaboration of companies to come together. Okay, so next step then, you understand where you want to be, you understand where you are through the supplier code and the traceability codes, you understand where you currently are. So you're going to then sort of subtract and figure out what you need to get yourself to your long-term goal. You're going to prioritize that. You're going to set objectives and targets. And then finally, you're going to report on that, on the work that you've done. I would recommend that we also make sure that we're not only communicating our progress, but our challenges as well, which are really important. Reporting, we just recommend that you put it up on your website, the work you've been doing. That's really helpful, to Steffi's point, for other people looking to do similar work. So I think that's pretty much what I'm gonna leave it here. I just want to remind you that this is hard work, as Steffi said. The point of the main objective of this is to help share resources and share effort with a broader collaboration of people with networks, as opposed to expecting you to do it by yourself. So at that point, I think I'm going to hand it back to Allison.
Great. Thank you so much, Darren. As Darren mentioned, this is a 70-page document, and so we obviously aren't going to be able to get through all of it today, but I think that was a great summary, and I really appreciate you walking us through those parts of it. Also, a quick shout out to not be intimidated by the 70 pages. It's kind of a go to the section that will be most useful to you sort of tool. But I wanted to go ahead and launch a second poll here, just to learn about, after hearing some of the topics that are in this tool, what would be the most valuable to explore next? So your options are materiality and materiality assessment, environmental impacts and animal agriculture, impacts of supply chains on people and communities, animal welfare, and responsible sourcing, or something else. So I'll give everybody a few seconds to respond to that. All right. Just a few more moments. All right, let's go ahead and close it and see where we're at. All right, so we got a pretty good spread here. It looks like the one that came out on top was environmental impacts of animal agriculture. That's a great topic. And then in second place, we had animal welfare. But we got some answers for all of them. So thank you so much for participating in that. So I want to invite actually Darren and Steffi to come back on. We want to, of course, end this conversation in steps of taking action. So Steffi, I wanted to ask you, do you have one main tip for how people can take action towards responsible sourcing of animal protein?
One tip, well, reach out to the PSC, of course. That's obviously the biggest tip. I think what I have learned along the way that is absolutely critical, like imperative, is to connect engage, collaborate with those around you. We would not be where we are today without that connection and that engagement. And we would not, personally, I would not have learned as much as I've learned about food systems in general, not just in our industry, but outside of our industry. And as Darren said, how our industry supports food systems and how it's actually, because of us, we're able to be as sustainable as possible by using so many different parts of the animal that the human industry doesn't use. So I would say connect and with your stakeholders, with, partners, with the PSC who can connect you to so many different people. But that's the biggest learning for us. And collaboration is key. Absolutely. Your stakeholders and your peers and your colleagues and your friends are incredibly important.
Great. Darren, did you want to add anything to that? Do you have one big tip? Or yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think never disagree with Steffi. She always gets it right. I mean, I think ultimately, don't be intimidated, as you mentioned. It's 70 pages, but it's not 70 pages like small fonted. Um, uh, but for those of you, just start where you are, right? I think that's the thing. Also, the resources are tough, the leverage issue is tough, but that's why, to Steffi's point, reaching out to other people in your own industry, but also in other industries is so valuable. You don't have to do it like I think a lot of times when I speak with companies, it's the sense that they're doing it on their own, as if they have this, there's an entire supply chain that's only selling to them and only this one part, but you're part of a much bigger chain with a lot of other people that are interested in doing the same work you're doing. And as Steffi said, you provide real value.
Great. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
Allison,
oh, go ahead.
is it okay if I add just one more thing? There's just no reason to reinvent the wheel. I think that this work is really hard. And I do want to echo, don't let the 70 pages intimidate you. It's really such an incredible framework. And all of you that are on this call will use different parts of it for sure. But that's what's so great about it, is that the sections are so identified as what you need, is what is in it, but what you need. And you can easily go to that part. And the glossary is incredible. It's an incredible resource. For those of you that, would like to share with your teams and for them to learn as well. And then lastly, I want to just put it out there that if anybody ever wants to reach out to me to ask questions or just talk anything through, I'm available anytime as well.
Thank you. All right, so I'm really hearing from you both that like it's maybe the concept of it is intimidating, but one, the work is being done, so you don't have to redo it. Find what's already out there, and two, you're not alone, and that this is really a good opportunity for collaboration and working together. So on that note, I wanted to announce that to complement this static tool that is the blueprint, PSC is also offering a few other ways to engage on this topic. We continue to host webinars, and the topics that are relevant to this responsible sourcing are going to keep popping up. We have the materiality one coming later in August, and then we are also building out a pipeline of webinars on this topic to really help you get connected to those resources that already exist. More on the collaboration side of things, we're also launching a new sustainable ingredient cohort for PSC members. We do curate these groups to make sure that the people in them are there's really rich discussion happening, but our cohorts are one of our favorite member benefits. Currently, we have a sustainability cohort and a European cohort. Now we will be launching a sustainable ingredient cohort. So I'll be sharing a link at the end of this for PSC members to express interest in that. But we're really just trying to support that sense of you're not in it alone. There are other people doing this and creating those spaces where that collaboration and knowledge sharing can happen. All right, so we're at the part where we're at the Q&A. I want to drop in the chat a bunch of links, but while I'm doing that, let me open up our Q&A and let Darren and Steffi start discussing some of this. So I'm gonna ask one question that I see here. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of creating the blueprint? What was the most challenging part? How long did it take? How many people or companies were involved?
I guess I'll take that one. So, I think it was big. It's a big process. And so it took a while. I think it probably took a total of 6 months to pull together, maybe 8 months. We've been working on it sort of on and off for about the last year. So that would be it. I think the most challenging part is just trying to find ways to make sure that it's valuable to members where they are. I think that's sort of the thing, right? It's much simpler to write, for those folks that are near the end of their journey that have, done a lot of work and sort of need some polishing, or for those that are at the absolute beginning. But hopefully this covers this whole thing. I think the other thing is that we were really cognizant that and one of the things that's great about both Steffi and the PSC is that their willingness to share this with non-members and with people from outside of the organization. So I think the fact that this blueprint, although it's aimed at the pet food industry, is actually, is the impacts are going to be the same if I were an apparel company that made coats or used leather. I would certainly look to this as well. So I think is the big challenge. And who was involved? There's actually a list of folks. It's a bunch, so there were a lot of them. We really want to ensure that we were getting as many inputs as we could, and we just wanted to, make sure that we included everyone. So everyone that's on those lists is available as well, as Stephanie mentioned. Happy to speak with anyone with any questions, and also reach out to especially the NGOs and the people listed in the glossary.
Great. All right. There's a question, and I've seen some come through the chat too, about just kind of the geographical range that the document and the work covers. So can you talk about if what's in it is relevant to the UK and other parts of the world?
Yeah, so because of the geographic location of the PSC members, we focused on 3 regions. So North America, so Canada, US, Mexico, Latin America, focusing mostly on Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Chile for farmed salmon, and the EU, UK. So the reasons for that are that not only sort of the where companies are situated, where they sell, but also we recognize that Latin America as an exporter has a lot of impact on sort of the sustainability work that people in Europe and the US and globally are doing. So that's it. Again, I mean, really happy to continue the work to add in Asia and others. But there was just a limit on what we could accomplish. So the differences really will be around the details in there. And again, I think the opportunity is to work with PSC, join the cohorts, but also look to your stakeholders. So for example, you're interested in the impact of the EU directives on animal welfare issues in the EU and the UK, I would absolutely just look to, one of those local stakeholders to help clarify that for you.
Thank you. There are great questions coming in, so we're just going to keep plugging through them. We have 15 more minutes, so that's exactly what we want to do. So I'm going to keep reading them off. So one question here says, can you suggest 3 to 4 highest impact action steps? I'm hearing some awesome progress steps toward positive action. One mentor answered this question by saying, sell less beef. So are there specific things like that that we know from the blueprint?
Yeah, I mean, I think two things. Actually, I think a lot of things. Let me try to organize my thoughts around this. You're buying the food, things are being made, there are going to be impacts, right? So there will be positive impacts, negative impacts. So we're not working towards perfection, we're working towards improvement. Um, and the impacts of animal agriculture, selling the beef, is certainly something that some companies are going to look at to be really helpful, going to be part of their branding going forward. And that is absolutely one way of doing it. And you know, makes sense from a brand point of view. We also recognize that the pet industry and the pet food industry is growing faster than the human food industry. So that pressure we've seen on availability and cost of animal proteins is going to continue. So you know, there's certainly that sort of thing that'll do it. So again, it really depends where you are. I think looking at sort of, to your point, looking at the ingredients you're sourcing. Are you using the correct amounts of them? Are you over sourcing? Are you putting too much protein in is really important. I think looking to what we're saying is that there's an opportunity in these other types of systems, whether that be regen ag, organic, to actually have better impacts. You know, the potential for improved environmental and animal welfare impacts and social impacts are really in these non-intensive production systems, right? Ultimately, part of that is just that when we buy from conventional systems, we're actually buying commodity products, and we don't have, and that cost comes based on the supply and the demand to the market. So there's no economic way to incent producers and to help them pay for those transitions. So by going to some of the higher welfare certified, not only does that deal with your traceability issues, you have a really good oversight of what's happening on the farm, but it also allows you to provide economic rewards to people that are doing the things that you want them to do. So I'll leave that two and leave it up to Steffi to fill out.
Yeah, I totally agree, Darren. The other, yeah, so for us, you know, I'm not sure who asked that question. It's a good one, a really good one, because we absolutely want to take action. And, you know, I was really fortunate that I was able to work with PSC and Darren early on in this process, which is why we really got to the 4-factor framework and then eventually this blueprint. And I'm excited for what Darren said about what more is to come around plant-based and insects. So what I would say is, you know, one of the biggest things I think that is incredibly impactful is to create your partner or your supply code of conduct and your responsible sourcing guidelines, because you really can't do anything without that. You can't, you know, your partners or ingredient suppliers won't know what your expectations are, right? And so if you don't have that, you can't make any impact anyway. So I think that's the first one. The second one is, and what we're focusing on in some ways, as much as we possibly can, is ensuring 100% traceability and working with partners that are meeting our expectations and not working at all with intensive farm systems. And that's been incredibly beneficial for us. And I think also our partners, because we're doing that together. It's deepening the relationship. It's making it more meaningful. And I'm really learning so much about farms and producers along the way as I visit them and as I learn sort of what their challenges are so that we can help them. Another thing that I think is really important is connecting with people outside of your industry, because again, I'm a smaller supplier, especially to larger companies, especially in the human food industry. However, I'm not using any of those same parts, right? I'm using different parts of the animal. And it's been really great to connect with people in the human food space so that I can work with producers with them because I'm using a different part, and that's been incredibly impactful. So what I would say is to start connecting with and reaching out to people and to organizations outside of the industry. And then lastly is to continue to look for, like Darren said, third-party certified producers, and third-party, I would say, vendors that are chain of custody certified as well. And that's been a very good thing. There was one more thing that I lost my train of thought, but I will get back to it because I remember it being important, but it went out the door. So I'll have to get back to you guys on that one. But those are the most, I would say, impactful things to do. Oh, I remembered it. Look for species specific, commitments, like the Better Chicken commitment. That's one way that you can also make an incredibly huge impact. There's not too anymore really. I mean, I think California Prop 12 is something that's really been amazing. Hopefully the EATS Act, if it's passed, will not affect that. Let's keep our fingers crossed. But being a member or a signatory of the BCC and then a member of the U.S. Working Group for Broiler Welfare has really opened me up to those different industries so that I can work closely with them and make sure we're using the whole animal.
We have a few questions in here about just like the scope of the document. Anyone who maybe has an eye for detail notices that there is the 4-factor framework, but the blueprint focuses on 3 things. So the question is, why is nutrition omitted from the blueprint?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Again, this was part of the engagement process we did as we move forward. There's just a recognition that ultimately nutrition is managed more at a product level than an ingredient level. The way that you will manage nutrition won't be through a supplier code of conduct or through sourcing as likely. I mean, for those of us that were at Impact and Unleashed a couple of years ago, Tina Owens from the Regen Ag folks had a really interesting thing along nutrition, but ultimately it's not really managed in this same way. It's managed less in sourcing and more in recipe development.
Okay, Steffi, did you have anything?
Yeah, well, I also just think that none of us are going to make a product that's not nutritional. So I think for us, if we're looking at the 4-factor framework, nutrition is number 1, right? Because we want to make the most nutritious product because we want to enhance quality of life. So I think it goes without saying that nutrition is all of our number 1 priority when it comes to the animals in our the companion animals in our lives, right? Our family members that are companion animals. So I also think that that's something that we've talked about a lot, that Darren and I have talked about a lot, that it just goes without saying that nutrition is the factor, right? But we are not really, it is part of the formula, the formulation, the development of the formula, and I think it just goes without saying. So the other 3 areas are the areas that really impact, sustainability, and that's the environment, the social, and animal welfare.
Yep. All right. we're not going to have time to get to all these questions. So if we don't get to yours, please feel free to email them to us, go to our website and contact us because it's important to get these questions answered for you. Um, let's see. We're getting some questions about byproducts. There's one about how the part of beef that is eaten by humans, the other parts are just left over. So like kind of why does that matter? Is it considered upcycled, or basically any comments you have specifically about byproducts and how those should be leveraged in the supply chain would be a welcome answer.
If you want to go first.
Sorry, I was on mute. You can go first, Darren, and then I'll give my color commentation
Yeah, I
or
think
commentary.
with all due respect, I'm not sure that that's an argument that really works for anybody outside of um, that industry. Outside of sort of it's a product, right? Any product will be waste if you don't use it. So I'm not sure that's it. I would say most importantly because it is a significant contribution to those impacts that as a risk to reputation and brand, I'm not sure that the part of the animal that it actually comes out of is significant to your consumers or customers. So I think that's going to be the big issue. We're not really talking here about measuring GHG emissions, so it's really about what are the impacts that you want to manage. And I think it's hard. I think the companies that want to do the right things, and companies realize that they have this impact, right? As Steffi mentioned, there's the if we think that most in general, the human food part of a carcass, um, the money the producers and processors make on that is sort of break even. So it's really in the byproducts and the co-products where that economic viability comes from, right? So it's really all of you. So if you're not there, the economic viability of the industry goes away. So it's hard to then go back and argue because of that it's a byproduct and not of significant importance.
Steffi, did you
I'm
want to add anything?
Well, I don't know if I actually understand the question. I'm a little bit confused. Is the question saying that a byproduct is a negative thing?
No, it's just saying that perhaps a byproduct has a different impact or a different process of evaluating and managing the impact than other parts of the animal. So I think Darren provided a great answer, and also this is a really big topic in the pet industry that we
It
could probably
is.
host a whole webinar on it. So I'm gonna mentally note that as something to
I do think we should. I think it's something that we should talk about because I do think there's a lot of misconceptions and um uh just different thoughts about byproducts or co-products and what does that mean and are they nutritious and should they be used and all of and how are they measured. So I think it would be worth talking about that, definitely that more, maybe in another
Yep.
webinar.
So we have just a few seconds left. Darren and Steffi, thank you so much for your time. Do you have any, like a parting phrase that you want to leave people with?
I guess I just will repeat that it feels like a lot. There are a lot of great questions. And I know that there's probably many, many more. I can see that there's many, many more. And I think what I would say is don't let this be intimidating. Actually allow this to help those of you and know that there's an entire resource of people around you that can help and want to help. So feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Steffi. Darren, any last word?
No, as usual, she killed it. Feel free to reach out to everybody. I think there's real, you're all doing the same work. You all are experiencing the same challenges, resource constraints. Share the work across the people that are doing it.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for joining me today to talk about the blueprint. Everyone online, I hope you downloaded the blueprint, and I hope to see you next week at our Buyer Insights panel. And that concludes our webinar. Thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day. Bye-bye.